and it is August 19th, 2021. And today I want to talk with you about Afghanistan. And what I have on my screen here is a search from U.S. soldiers guarding the poppy fields, and then I click images, and what comes up is all these pictures of the U.S. military guarding the poppy fields in Afghanistan. And these are various articles that you can go through and read. The secret government, soldiers in the poppy fields. Let's see, retired CIA agent, we run the opium trade. And you can scroll down and you can see all these different news agencies that I'm pointing at the bottom here, talking about the U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan and the drug trade there, and them guarding the fields. Does this picture right here with these pink flowers, does this look like they're working the fields? This is by the Daily Caller. Do they look like they are working the fields in these pictures? Do they have the tools that you would need to destroy poppy fields? Is this a tool, a shovel, a hoe? Are those tools for taking out poppy fields? And look who we have here: Public Intelligence, Gag Daily, just goes on and on, Global Research. And we come down here, and what do we have? We have the Army.military saying troops are working to eradicate poppy fields in Afghanistan. Look at this frickin' picture. He's got a stick. Is he beating the plants with a stick to take them down? Is this the most ridiculous, stupid thing you could possibly do? I'm sure our military could bring in some agricultural equipment, some farm equipment, cut this crap down, put it all in a big stack, and light it on fire. So we have all these other news agencies, True Democracy, Public Intelligence, Stot.net, talking about the opium trade. And here we have just continued denial by the military, continued denial by those people on TV, and our government say nothing and want to continue to say nothing about why we were really there. This is Elizabeth Gould and Paul Fitzgerald, and they wrote a book in 2009 entitled Afghans' Untold Story. And they go in depth over who created the Mujahideen and the Taliban. It was the CIA and ISIS. They wanted to get into Afghanistan and put people in their government that would be friendly with Pakistan. And they also had an intent to draw the Russians into Afghanistan because of the Cold War. If they could keep them busy, then they couldn't attack us. So they have a great book out, and all the videos that I use, or any of the links that I use, I put them down below. And so I ask that you go and listen to them. They go in depth on what's happened in Afghanistan, and they start back in the 70s at the very beginning. And so it's really frustrating to see that there's been books written, and there's been a lot of books written about Afghanistan. And there are lots of videos out there about Afghanistan and the opium trade. This is on BitChute. And of course, here you're seeing articles with pictures, but yet the people on TV and the government want to continue to act like nothing at all was going on. Absolutely nothing. And this is going to confirm it. This is a document from August 2009. Afghanistan's narco war breaking the link between drug traffickers and insurgents. Whoops. A report to the Committee on Foreign Relations, United States Senate, August 2009. And this was given to the Committee on Foreign Relations. And I have been looking for a WikiLeaks document that I read before and can't find. And it's an email to Bob Corker, and it is telling him just everything about the CIA and Afghanistan and the Taliban and their whole drug trafficking thing. And I thought, this is the last person you would want to send this to is Bob Corker. He's an investor in all of it. I mean, the Committee on Foreign Relations, oh boy, they're a whole nother story. But I want to go down and read this to you. This is the executive summary. As part of the military expansion, the administration has assigned U.S. troops a lead role in trying to stop the flow of illicit drug profits that are bankrolling the Taliban and fueling the corruption that undermines the Afghan government. Tens of millions of drug dollars are helping the Taliban and other insurgent groups buy arms, build deadlier roadside bombs, and pay fighters. The emerging consensus among senior military and civilian officials from the United States, Britain, Canada, and other countries operating in Afghanistan is that the broad new counterinsurgency mission is tied with the new counter-narcotics strategy. Simply put, they believe the Taliban cannot be defeated and good government cannot be established without cutting off the money generated by Afghans' opium industry, which supplies more than 90% of the world's heroin and generates an estimated $3 billion a year in profit. The change is dramatic for a military that once ignored the drug trade flourishing in front of their eyes. No longer are U.S. commanders arguing that going after the drug lords is not part of their mandate. Well, of course, this paragraph is just a lie on its face. The militaries have always been involved in drug trafficking. You can read Dope Inc. and find out about the opium trade. And so the military comes out and says that they need to stop the Taliban, they need to stop the drug trade, or else they're not going to be able to build a government. And yet, the CIA, our intelligence agency, is running the drug trade. So we have two government agencies that are opposing each other. Let me continue with this document. No longer are U.S. commanders arguing that going after the drug lords is not part of their mandate. In a dramatic illustration of the new policy, major drug traffickers who help finance the insurgency are more likely to find themselves in the crosshairs of the military. Some 50 of them are now officially on the target list to be killed or captured. I would love to see pictures and the names of the 50 people that were on that list and see if they were ever captured or not, if that objective was ever met. Simultaneously, the U.S. has set up an intelligence center to analyze the flow of drug money to the Taliban, that would be from the CIA, and corrupt Afghan officials, and a task force combining military, intelligence, and law enforcement resources from several countries to pursue drug networks linked to the Taliban in South Afghanistan awaits formal approval. So I wonder if they ever got formal approval to follow the flow of the drug money to the Taliban, because if they did get approval, they've completely failed since 2009. And if they completely failed, it's because they were meant to fail, because the CIA and the Taliban are working together, and this has to stay secret, right? Let's continue. An equally fundamental change is underway on the civilian side of the counter-narcotics equation. The administration has declared, let me highlight this, that eradication of poppies, the mainstay of the former administration, is a failure. Yeah, we saw a picture earlier of a guy with a club. How long would it take to take down 5,000 acres? I don't know. is a failure, and that the emphasis will shift to promoting alternative crops and building a legal agricultural economy in a country without one for 30 years. This marks the first time the United States has had an agriculture strategy for Afghanistan. Fail. Did they do this since 2009? They absolutely did not. So, this is a report to the Committee on Foreign Relations regarding the military strategy in Afghanistan in 2009. And the military to date, and in this last couple days, has said nothing about the drug trade in Afghanistan. The Committee on Foreign Relations has said nothing, nor your state senators, nor your, senators in Congress. They haven't said anything. This is just supposed to go away, and the Taliban's going to take over Afghanistan. The CIA is going to take over Afghanistan. So you can see that not the people on TV, and not our governments, and not our military are telling us the truth about what is going on in Afghanistan. Many other people are, but all we're getting is propaganda. A guy with a stick taking down poppies. That's ridiculous. This document came from WikiLeaks and the GIF files, or the Global Intelligence files. So thank you, Julian Assange. And this document is not classified. Now let's take a look at one of the many articles that were written on CIA and the Taliban. And this is by American Free Press. And its title is CIA Fueling New U.S. Drug Epidemic Using Cheap Afghani Heroin. CIA Obama Team Up to Hide Darkest Secrets. And this was March 26, 2014. So about 7 years ago. Across the U.S., heroin use has skyrocketed. But how are these drugs getting into the country? And is the CIA back to its old tricks, using drug money to fund covert operations? Why, yes it is. By Victor Thorne. The tragic overdose death of Academy Award-winning actor Philip Seymour Hoffman on February 2nd brought renewed interest to the subject of cheap heroin on American streets. Across the country, heroin use is on the rise, despite the billions of dollars spent by United States law enforcement fighting it. Recently, southwestern Pennsylvania suffered 22 overdoses in a little more than a week's time from tainted heroin, and dozens of users were hospitalized in Camden, New Jersey due to the highly potent batch that was being sold on the streets of that city. One of the big questions asked by naive media talking heads is, where does all this heroin come from? The answer is the same as it was a decade ago, following a Central Intelligence Agency invasion of Afghanistan. 75 to 80% of the world's heroin is exported from Afghanistan, in spite of the fact that the U.S. military controls a great deal of that mountainous country. Production levels hit record highs last year. Since American forces have been entrenched in Afghanistan for a dozen years and have squandered over $700 billion to date, American Free Press has long been one of the few publications to openly address a highly taboo subject. Namely, elements within the CIA have been heavily involved with illegal narcotics trafficking since the Vietnam War in the 1960s and 70s, and Iran-Contra in the 1980s. Now I want to stop and talk a moment about this $700 billion of our tax money going to Afghanistan. But first, let's take a look at a video from Julian Assange.
Because the goal is not to completely subjugate Afghanistan. The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
The goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war, and to take the tax money from the taxpayers and to give it to the elite. So how is that done? Well, our Congress appropriates money to the military, and the military hands out a certain amount of money for Afghanistan, and the generals who are in charge of the Afghan theater hand out money to subcontractors. And let's say you're a subcontractor like BlackRock, and you're paid $35 million for whatever it is you do. Lethal surveying, something like that. And you pay out your people $5 million and you take away the owner $30 million. And that $30 million that you're getting is really, payback for other jobs that you invested in. And you'll just take some of that money and invest in another agenda that the deep state and military has going on. And all of this is our tax money. And nothing was solved in 20 years. And, in 2014, the military had spent $700 billion. While vets are on the streets, we are spending money to guard the poppy fields, I guess. All right, let's read on. On March 13th, this reporter contacted investigative historian Robert Morrow, whose research into the murder of CIA-sanctioned pilot Barry Seal is unparalleled. Seal claims to have run drugs for the U.S. intelligence. And he did, the CIA. When asked about official criminality associated with Afghans' opium business, Morrow replied, U.S. government involvement in the drug trade ebbs and flows depending on a particular administration's level of corruption. If a Bush or a Clinton is in office, you better believe it's rip-roaring. Morrow provided more insights. Or maybe their complicity is so institutionalized that presidents don't even control it. Intelligence agencies and the military do. The government has many faces. One DEA agent could be entirely honest, while another one is on the take from drug cartels and the government. Delving into deep state secrets, Morrow stressed the people who ran all the drugs into America during the Iran-Contra era were George Bush Sr., CIA Director William Casey, Oliver North, and both Clintons. Airports like the one in Mena, Arkansas, that Bill and Hillary operated, stretched all across the southern U.S. You need to remember that Barry Seal, who allegedly flew more cocaine into America than any pilot in history, was personal friends with Bill Clinton. He also spoke with Bush Sr. on a weekly basis. Morrow turned his attention to Clinton's partner in crime. As Vice President, George Bush Sr. had all aspects of law enforcement answering to him, said Morrow. That way, legitimate police officers weren't arresting his CIA drug dealers. Well, George Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA, which many of us did not find out until maybe 10, 15 years ago. So he probably built that relationship with him when he was in the CIA. Ending on a riveting note, Morrow said, these topics aren't expressed in the mainstream media because it would be detrimental to the government's credibility. No kidding. Nobody is supposed to know that certain elements running our country are drug dealers, murderers, and thugs. And they certainly are. On March 13th, this reporter also spoke with Dean Henderson, author of the book Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf, 4 Horsemen, 8 Families, and Their Global Intelligence, Narcotics and Terror Network. Whew, that's a long title. In terms of CIA links to the Afghan heroin trade, Henderson said, They've been running it from the get-go, all the way back to just when the Mujahideen were formed. It's been the same game, starting with Jimmy Carter's people through Reagan, the Bushes, Clinton, and now Obama. Henderson provided more details. After Vietnam War, when heroin stopped coming out of the Golden Triangle, the CIA set up bases near Afghanistan in the late 1970s. CIA asset Osama bin Laden, that name sounds familiar, right? CIA asset Osama bin Laden helped train these men, and soon warlords were planting poppies. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. Obama's advisors work for the same neocons as did Bush's. The same people do the dirty work. This article is very helpful in understanding history and what's gone on, but let's take it even a little further back and let's listen to Fletcher Prouty talk about history and weapons being left behind, because after that we're going to look at the weapons that were left behind in Afghanistan, as I have the WikiLeaks document that shows various lists of the equipment that would be there and available for the Taliban.
Probably that's his way of doing it.
Hello, my name is Jeff Steinberg. I want to welcome you to a very special edition of the LaRouche Connection. Today, it is my great privilege to introduce as our guest for the next hour Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, a distinguished career military officer, an historian, an author, an expert on the international railroad industry. Some of you may be familiar with Colonel Prouty from his 1970s book, The Secret Team, which has now recently been republished and is once again available. And of course, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people in the United States and around the world are familiar with Colonel Prouty as the real live character upon whom the figure of Mr. X in the recent Oliver Stone movie JFK was based. Colonel Prouty has recently published a new book called JFK, the CIA, and the plot, the CIA, Vietnam, and the plot to kill John Kennedy. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Colonel Prouty here to the show today. I thought that it would be sensible, rather than giving a long sort of a curriculum vitae introduction, to ask you to start off by telling our audience a little bit about yourself, your career, because it is so extraordinary and it's such an important backdrop to the discussion that we're going to have about the book today.
You know, Jeff, I came on duty actually as an Army cavalryman. I've ridden horses as far as 600 miles, you know, day after day. Started with that, went into tanks. So I was on duty before Pearl Harbor. And after that, I went through flying school. And I was based in Cairo. And one day I was asked to pick up a team of people that were going on a trip, and they were a geological survey team going into Saudi Arabia to look at the oil fields there during the war. And then we came back and we found out that Roosevelt, Churchill, and Chiang Kai-shek were having a conference in Cairo, the Cairo Conference of World War II, and that the geological survey people made a report to Roosevelt, who ordered immediately a 50,000 barrel a day refinery to be built in Saudi Arabia. And that started that big Saudi Arabian oil boom that we've seen since then. So when you take part in something like that early in your career, you're kind of interested in the way things develop. And a morning or two later, after the Cairo conference ended, I was told to get my plane ready. Went out to the plane and they brought Chinese delegation out there, and we flew to Tehran. I didn't know what was going to happen in Tehran, but I had just been ordered to fly there. En route, I stopped at Habanea in Iraq, and a plane came in with an old friend of mine flying it, and Elliot Roosevelt. So I introduced Elliot Roosevelt to the Chinese. But do you know, to this day, you cannot find in a history book that the Chinese were at the Tehran conference with Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill. I know one book printed by the U.S. government that corroborates that. Of course, I have pictures, and my co-pilot and my crew were there. But part of the Tehran Conference business was to make plans for the Far East after World War II. So you begin to think about how these things happen when they come up like that. And I was in Japan at the end of the war. We were bringing the POWs out as soon as we could. And I went back to Okinawa, where we were based, and they were loading ships with this enormous stockpile of equipment that was to be used to support the invasion of Japan, 500,000 men, and we didn't need it. So I was talking with the harbor master in Naha, and I said, what are you going to do, run that all back to the States? He said, hell no. He said, half of this is going up to Seoul, Korea. And he said, the other half we're sending down to Hanoi. Half of what we were going to use to go into Japan went to Korea, and half went to Hanoi. This was September 2nd of 1945, and those plans were in being at that time. Now, who made those plans? Truman had been president for only a few months. I doubt that he did, but you know, who made the plans for that? Because a little later came the Korean War, and they used the weapons we sent there. Came the war in Vietnam, and Ho Chi Minh was using the weapons we gave him. He used them against the French. That's why he was able to surprise the French with first-class artillery pieces that they didn't think he had. Then we reversed the field, and we began to back the French to the extent that we spent $2 to $3 billion supporting the French against Ho Chi Minh. In 1954, they were defeated at Dien Bien Phu. Ho Chi Minh inherited all of the arms they lost, and then from 54 until 65, we were involved in Vietnam, but under the operational control of the CIA, not a military operation. And this gets very important when you see things like that happen because, well, just think of one problem that's in the papers all the time, the POWs and the MIAs. You don't have POWs when you don't have an army there. Just because somebody's working for CIA doesn't give them the status of a POW, and so on. All these things get confused in a historical story that doesn't really make sense. The first military people who went into Vietnam were the Marines at Da Nang in March of 1965. And yet, as John Foster Dulles had made a speech himself, we had been in Vietnam since 1945, 20 years in the preparation, you might say, for this war. And then why do I use the word preparation? Because some of the things that were done, like this arms movement and setting up the units in Vietnam before we ever had military people there, took 20 years to do that.
You made a point, by the way, I should just interrupt here because I think it's very important because people may be somewhat misled by the title of the book, which talks about the JFK assassination. I think it's essential to tell people that this is truly an extraordinary history of the entire period of what's been called the Cold War, building up to the Kennedy assassination and beyond. And the question you yourself just posed, who made those decisions? In the very beginning chapter of the book, you use a term that I think was originally coined by Buckminster Fuller, the international power elite. And you talked in what to me was very impressive terms about some of these behind-the-scenes decision makers. You talked about the propaganda schemes that sort of define their world outlook. And I think, you know, maybe it would be worthwhile as we get into this real history of the Cold War to perhaps start out by just telling people a little bit about this international power elite and these propaganda schemes and how some of this thing works.
Well, you know, it's very common for people to respond when you try to speak that way, saying, oh, well, here's somebody that just believes in conspiratorial theories or is a little bit paranoid. But now we ought to stop and think carefully what we're talking about. All of history has been controlled by powerful figures. Disraeli in the 19th century said, for those people who are not aware of it, if they realize what goes on behind government, they wouldn't believe it. Sun Tzu, the Chinese emperor, said the same thing back in his period. Buckminster Fuller goes back 2,000 years talking about the elite. And in this country today, we recognize the power behind, let's say, lobbyists who are, in a sense, above the government in that They pay special money to the president to get him reelected. They pay special money to senators and congressmen to get them reelected, but to influence legislation in their favor. And there is and has been throughout history an elite that runs countries and the world. What is this one world all about? And if we don't recognize that, it's very difficult to understand the situation we're in.
Fletcher Prouty is a wealth of knowledge, and he was also on a hand-picked team of President Kennedy. He has written 3 books. 2 of them I find here, The Secret Team, which was actually written in '73, and this book here, JFK, the CIA, Vietnam, and the Plot to Assassinate JFK. He tells us in this video, which is just shocking, that at the end of the war in 1945, September 1945, the harbor master tells him that the vehicles that are all there, all the military equipment that is there, is not going to Japan, not going back to the U.S., but is going to, part of it to Vietnam and part of it to Korea. So setting up 20 years in advance those wars. So who was in charge of telling them to move this equipment? And who was the person above him and above him and above him? Those people would be interesting to know because they're part of the deep state. And who were the people that were receiving this equipment in Vietnam and Korea? Were their governments complicit? Were they being paid off to bring this equipment in and store them there? There should be some record of who was waiting in Vietnam and Korea for this equipment to arrive there. But he tells us that the U.S. military pulls out of Vietnam and the CIA continues to stay there. And they create the Golden Triangle, and where they had been, growing poppies for the heroin trade. But then they began to make bases in Afghanistan. And that was the creep and the beginning of moving to Afghanistan. And this information is just, mind-blowing, going back as far, as World War II and then Vietnam. And then here we are, in Afghanistan. And talking about the military equipment, here is the WikiLeaks document that shows the military equipment in Afghanistan in 2007. And so I just want to go through a few of these to show you the type of equipment that the Taliban now has access to. All right, we have 13 IED jammers, a Citadel system, solar systems, countermeasure set, radio set, light armored vehicle, 6 of those, robot explosive ordnance disposal, acorn jammer, tent light maintenance, and some of these I don't even know, what they are. 2-way radios, a scale, radio sets, ICOM radio, night vision goggles, 4, all-terrain vehicles, 2, tent frames, Motorola Astro, Motorola 2-way, air conditioning, and all kinds of equipment here. Computer, radiography, vital signs monitor. This is medical equipment. Operating room, dental material. So all kinds of things for their medical tent. Ventilator, vaporizer, and a voice module. More jammers, 8 of them. And that's not very interesting. Pinhead trigger, brace shock mount. Then these are different car parts and screws and gaskets and nuts and washers. But then we get down here and we have mount machine gun, 7. And a gun mount, 6. a wrecker truck, a cargo truck, a tank truck, a utility truck, two of those, glass cutting vehicle, and radio sets, inserts. I don't know what the inserts are for. Two-way radios, jammers, carrier assembly, radio communication, GPS, handheld portable GPS, receiver scanner, motor vehicle Fords, two of those. So you're getting quite a bit of equipment there. A jammer, a scanner, 5 machine guns, and 12 12-gauge shotguns. And DOD, jammer, and whatever these inserts are, and a navigational set by Garmin. 6 of those. And jammers, sleeping bags, radio set, forward-looking infrared. That might help you with finding drug traffickers. Handheld and wide spectrum receiver. That might help you pick up, talk way off from drug traffickers. Maybe not, I don't know. Night Hunter Tactical. And what else do we have? We have a MG50, 3 of those. A mounted machine gun, 3 of those. A Mac gun, 3 of those. That's kind of nice. Navigational set. An NASE, 7 of those. GPS 1. Robot. Experimental MarkBot 4. That's rather interesting. Laser pointer. So you can go through this entire list. It's quite long, of all the equipment that was in Afghanistan as of 2007. Do you think they brought it home? Do you think they brought in new updated equipment, and has it changed? I'm thinking so. I'm thinking they, for things that need to be updated, I would think they would get new radios and all kinds of things. But this is just a list of the possible things that the Taliban could have. Machine guns, all sorts of vehicles, all sorts of things that would help you find drug traffickers. But yet that could not happen. All right, next. Here is this video by, this company here. And he asked this woman, Candy Cuddy, I think is her name. He is asking her about what's going on in Afghanistan and the intelligence report that was put out. And here it says the CIA warned U.S. officials of Afghans' rapid collapse to Taliban. But in here they never mention the CIA. What they say is the intelligence agencies had said weeks and weeks in advance that the Taliban were going from town to town to town and taking them over. And so it wasn't a surprise when they arrived in Kabul to take that over. They had been warned about it. And you just think, the intelligence agency warns the military. The military is busy guarding the poppy fields. And the Taliban just take over. He also asked, well, what about the government of Afghanistan? Why didn't they do anything? And she says, well, they didn't have enough people. But supposedly they had 300,000 in their military. So the Taliban take over. They've seized, the Taliban parade new weapons seized from Afghanistan military as U.S. withdraws. That's what they say. And here, watch contractor in Afghanistan shows all the weapons left behind by the U.S. at that Kabul airport. So we're not talking about the Afghan military. We're talking about equipment left behind by the U.S. military near the airport.
Radios,
there on the other side of the tarmac, you can see all the Afghans lined up. Place is turning into Mad Max quick. Over there on the outskirts of Kabul, I mean, we're well within striking distance. The Taliban is starting to get angry at us more than they are. This is where all the Gurkhas were set up last night waiting for their flights out. Abandoned luggage everywhere. Abandoned Toyotas. Anybody want a free bullet?
This is what's going on in Afghanistan. People trying to get out. U.S. military equipment being left behind. Another article, same thing. All kinds of equipment left behind. And then we have an article from A-Gulf. And it says, Khalfan, the collapse of the 300,000 Afghan army in 72 hours for the Taliban is a Hollywood movie. August 17th, 2021 by Team A-Gulf. Dubai, United Arab Emirates, CNN. Lieutenant General Dahani Khalfan, Deputy Chief of Police in Dubai, commented on recent developments in Afghanistan and the Taliban's entry into the capital, Kabul, describing the 72-hour collapse of the Afghan army as a Hollywood movie. This came in a series of tweets from Khalfan on his official Twitter page, where he said, President Biden says we have an official army of 300,000 fighters, compared to 75,000 Taliban fighters. The army certainly will, do, and have the ability to control. He continued, but the collapse of an army of 300,000 Afghan fighters, trained in 72 hours with the latest weapons for the Taliban forces, is a Hollywood movie par excellence. If America didn't want to host them in Doha, Doha would impose severe penalties for harboring the terrorists. Personally, I know very well that Doha cannot embrace them without the consent of the Americans. No Arab country can ever embrace those that the Americans call terrorists without the approval of America. He added, that's why what's happening in Afghanistan. Today's problem is that global policymakers have come to light through social media, and their lies are exposed. Yes, they are. I thought that was just a little interesting article there. But this is what I wanted to present to you today on Afghanistan. It really is horrific what's going on over there. And those who have been on television and those in the U.S. military absolutely know what has been going on in Afghanistan. And, what's the next move? Is China and Iran and Russia going to come in, take over Afghanistan for their Silk Road? That's what it seems like is going to happen to me, is they're going to push back the Taliban. Maybe they've already set up for the next place that is going to be, for their poppy fields. So what other country out there is the CIA setting up bases to create the next poppy field country? But they have spent, over 40 years just absolutely destroying the people and everything in Afghanistan for this drug trade. And it's just sickening. And I really think that the U.S. news and the military and the government need to talk about this in an open manner, or the military needs to begin arresting all the people that were involved in this. All the leaders. Of course, these men here in the field have been, commanded to go stand out there. It's not their fault. They don't give the orders. Who gave the orders? What happened in Afghanistan? It was just an absolute major failure. But actually for the CIA, it was a great success. The biggest failure was for the people. The U.S. military seemed to be aiding the CIA because their objectives in that document I showed you in 2009 was to capture 50 of the leaders, was to take the poppy fields and turn them into agriculture, and they had to get rid of the Taliban and the drug trade in order to build a government. And absolutely none of that was achieved after 20 years. This was a big money-moving game for the New World Order. And I hope people continue to speak out and tell their stories and urge an arrest of everyone involved in this. It's really ridiculous that it continues to be covered up from those on TV when it's everywhere. It's like you're in a different land. TV is a different land. They're not us, they're someone else. All right, this is Radioactive Banana. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.